and years, and we've made Roanoke, and I think we were 8th in the country in 2024. So yeah, that's a really big thing that we do. I'm a member of a contesting club, and we've got a couple of clubs in North Carolina and another one in South Carolina that we enjoy going to. My wife and I do that together. Just enjoy it.
Where is the club in Greer at?
Well, hi. It's a Wednesday evening, and this is a beginning amateur radio class. We're not at the beginning of the beginning, however. We're at chapter 6 out of 9 chapters in our book. This book right here, the American Radio Relay League License Manual for the Technician class, which is the beginning amateur radio license in the United States. So we work out of this book a chapter a week, and we're progressing rather nicely. Tonight we'll be talking about communicating with other hams, which is the whole point of the thing. I'm Gary, your instructor, ham radio call sign W4EEY, or we would say Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. And before we get started, I had a thought. Back when I got involved in amateur radio, and amateur radio has been a significant part of my life for a long time. So that's why we're teaching the classes, because it's meant so much. But back when I got started, beginning hams were all about high frequency radio, 3 to 30 megahertz. Morse code was probably our entry with a novice license. And I got started before that listening to international shortwave broadcasts, being a shortwave listener. Well, that was then, and this is now. And nowadays, new hams are generally more interested in keeping in communications during difficult times, weather events, other catastrophes or things like that. And the emphasis is on VHF and UHF. In fact, the technician license gives you all privileges on the VHF and UHF frequencies. Just an observation, which is why we'll be talking about VHF and UHF a bunch, but we'll also talk about the heritage and the history. And a lot of the way that we communicate has to do with high frequency radio, and we've just carried it on today. So let's go ahead and get started with the laptop, please, Marion. Communicating with other hams. There are 6 sections tonight, so we'll go through the first 3, we'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll come on back. So on VHF and UHF, we're going to talk about simplex versus duplex communications. And what it means is simplex uses one frequency, and each station then takes turns in communicating on that frequency. So here he's walking, talking to the car, and he says then over, and the car comes back to him on the same frequency, and when they're done they say over, and at the 10-minute interval of their conversation, both of them put out their station call signs. That's required by the FCC. And at the conclusion of their conversation, they conclude with their call signs after 10 minutes and at the end. So this is a simplex communication. Duplex communication uses 2 frequencies, and it's most commonly seen in the case of amateur radio repeaters. These are radio systems that are set up on high mountaintops or on very tall television towers. And the idea is that with the height comes range, and line of sight increases such that you can talk, be transmitting on one whoops, what happened there? Talking on one frequency here, it goes up to the repeater, and the repeater rebroadcasts it immediately right on a new frequency. And so the car is listening on the red frequency here, and then transmits on the repeater input frequency here in the blue, coming back to him on the red frequency. So this is duplex, or a form of duplex, using 2 frequencies. Now, simplex means on the one frequency. Duplex, it's actually half duplex from a repeater, because you still have to say over, you still have to take turns. If you had your old landline telephone, I don't know if anybody has those anymore, but those were full duplex. One person could be talking and the other could break in and say, no, wait. You could both talk at the same time. So that's what they call full duplex. Let me turn on my laser pointer here. So that's full duplex. Half duplex is what the repeater does. So knowing about simplex and duplex is important. We talked about the color charts, and on page 1-23 are the frequency allocations on the color chart. It's where amateur radio operators can transmit based on their class of license. And I have one over here, so I'm going to grab it. You can see here. Take a look at it if you have it there handy. Can hams operate single sideband on all of the VHF and UHF bands? Well, you want to check the legend that's there in the upper right-hand corner and over here on my chart, but it's kind of hard to see. And or I can use my laser pointer. There it is, right there. There's the legend. And you'll see phone is in green. And if you look at all of the VHF and UHF frequencies, you'll see there's green on all of them. So yes, indeed, technician class licensees can operate single sideband on all of the VHF and UHF bands. If you don't have one of these color charts, and they're kind of nice because they're a little easier to read than the one that's in your book, just send me an email if you would, w4eey@arrl.net, and say, Gary, I'd like one of your color charts. They're printed by the American Radio Relay League, and send me your mailing address. I can't mail it to you unless you send me that, and we'll get one out in the mail to you. They're glossy, but they're not laminated. But you could laminate it yourself if you wanted to. So these are frequency allocations. There's another way, though, that we talk about the frequencies that amateur radio operators use, and those are called band plans. And band plans are more specific. There are further subdivisions suggesting where certain modes can or should be found. And they're available online at the American Radio Relay League. The URL is here at the bottom. This is a portion of the band plan for 2 meters. And so you can see, if you were considering doing, you're probably not, but considering doing Earth, Moon, Earth, bouncing 2-meter signals off of the moon and hoping that somebody else will receive them, well, you would want to be operating in this frequency range here, 144.1 to 144.2. This is the EME, Earth, Moon, Earth area of operation for single sideband. For CW, it's up here. And it's important to know, if you're trying to use these modes, you need to know where to find other amateur radio operators also using those same modes. So if you go to the URL down here at the bottom, there are band plans for all of the bands, and I would suggest you print them out and have them in your hand check. They're a handy reference, especially if you're going on a band for the very first time and you want to know, well, where should I be operating and where am I likely to have success in making contacts. Now, the frequency allocations on the color chart, those are set by the FCC. Band plans are voluntary agreements. Band plans are gentlemen's agreements among hams. We consider it, this is what we want to do, but it's not law. The FCC does consider them to be good practice, and so that's something that we should do, but you can't guarantee that no interference will occur, and if you have interference, you're trying to do something and somebody else is interfering, just use the big knob, QSY, change frequency. That's what QSY means, change frequency. Oh my, well, already up to some questions. So go ahead and you can unmute and let me know what you think the right answer is. Please remember our 3-second rule. Wait about 3 seconds. It gives folks at home who are playing along, especially if they're watching on YouTube, a chance to pause, read the questions themselves, and then come up with their answer. So here's our first question for tonight. Where may single sideband phone be used in amateur bands above 50 megahertz?
Charlie.
You see that?
Robin?
Yeah, he said Charlie, and he was right. Charlie. You can use single sideband in at least some segment on all of the VHF and UHF bands. And 50 megahertz is the start of VHF. And what is a band plan beyond the privileges established by the FCC?
Alpha?
Alpha?
It is alpha. It's a voluntary guideline for using different modes or activities within an amateur band. And what term describes an amateur station that is transmitting and receiving on the same frequency?
Charlie.
Simplex. Think simple. Simplex. Yes, indeed. All right. Moving on to section 6.2, making contacts. Again, here we're in VHF and UHF, and for FM, the little handy talkies that we use, those are FM radios. And the national FM calling frequencies, they'd be on a band plan. For 2 meters, it's 146.52 megahertz. Notice it's in blue. Blue text means something. Might be a test question. For the 70 centimeter band, the national calling frequency for FM is 446 megahertz. So if you are tooling down the road, you have a radio in your car, let's say, and you don't know any of the local repeater frequencies, well, you could dial your radio over to one of these simplex frequencies and just throw your call sign out there and see if anybody comes back. And you'd be surprised, going down the freeway or whatnot, you'll find another ham who might also be monitoring one of these two frequencies, 146.52 or 446 megahertz. Now, range is going to be limited because you're operating simplex. Radio repeaters provide you much greater range, and so you can use a repeater directory book. ARRL sells them, or you can use an app for your phone. Repeater Book is a good free app for both Apple and Android. Then when you know the frequencies for a repeater and get them programmed into your radio, then you can check in. Well, how do you check in to a radio repeater? Well, what I'm going to say is listen first. It's rude to break into an existing conversation, so listen, make sure that there's not already a conversation going on, unless that's your intent, unless there's, you've been looking for that guy. You want to break in and say, hey, I've been looking for you. But for general check-in, all you do is you throw out your call sign. You key up with the push to talk button and say Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. In my case, you'll use your call sign. And then you could also say monitoring or listening. Of course, if you do that, then there's always a joker that comes back to you that says, hey, Gary, what are you listening for? Okay, but you'll hear that. So if you monitor radio repeaters, VHF and UHF, this is the kind of thing that you will hear. Now, if you know the call sign of another operator and you want to call them specifically, make sure the repeater is not in use, and then you can call them directly by using their call sign. Here's my friend Bob up in Edneyville, North Carolina. ND7J, ND7J, here is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Release the push to talk and see if he comes back. So that's getting on a repeater. That's all it is. You don't call CQ on a repeater. I've heard it done, but it's in bad form. You didn't learn that here. Just throw your call sign out and somebody will come back to you. If you want a radio check specifically, if that's what you're doing, if you're doing testing and whatnot, say so. This is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee with a radio check, please. Then that motivates somebody to maybe come back to you and tell you how well you're getting into the radio repeater. Know your radio. They want us to know about the ability to listen on the repeater's input frequency. And on some radios that's done by using what they call the reverse button. Which on this Kenwood V71 is down there in the middle. And if you push that button, you're listening on the repeater's input frequency, and what that does is it tells you if the other station that you're trying to communicate with is within simplex range of you. If you can hear them transmitting to the input frequency, then you know they're close by. And it's possible then you could tell that person, okay, let's get off of the repeater, let's move to a nearby simplex frequency, and we can carry on our conversation then, and we can release the repeater for other amateur use. So that's a reverse button. Each radio is going to be different, but it allows you to listen on the repeater's input frequency, and if you can hear the other station, then you can operate simplex. Now, when you make that radio check, you know, this is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, radio check please, they may tell you, uh-oh, you've got a bad signal. Well, what are some of the things that it could be? Well, if it's an HT, well, your batteries could be running low, and when that happens, your signal will get distorted. We talked about with multipath, we were talking about in your house, there's an X. There's a point where you can get into the repeater clearly. Well, if you're off your X, your signal might be bad. That could be the case. Or have you set the frequency incorrectly when you were programming the radio? Just a slight misadjustment, it will sound distorted if you're trying to get into the repeater. Now note there are 3 blue texts there that kind of suggest something. So just keep that in mind. Radio repeaters are really marvelous things, and they've been made more marvelous over time through a process called linking. Amateur station repeaters that are connected to each other and to the internet. And there are 2 major groups for analog FM repeaters, Echolink and the Internet Radio Linking Project, IRLP. And it allows repeaters to be connected to the internet and then go out to another station or another repeater using voice over IP technology, VoIP. And voice over IP is just, you've digitized the voice, it's being sent over the internet, and it comes out at another location. So on your radio, if you know the proper codes, and on the front of your radio is a keypad, and that's where you can enter DTMF codes, dual tone multi-frequency codes. And if you know the right combination, which you can find out from your local ham club, you could make the Echolink connected repeater come out in, say, Dallas, Texas. So if you've got a friend who's in Dallas who's a ham who might be monitoring a repeater there, well, you can carry on a conversation back and forth using these linking technologies. DTMF, by the way, same tones that were generated by touch tone phones. So thank you, Ma Bell, for that. So here's a pictorial of Echolink and an example. We have a mobile station here, and they're talking into a repeater, and it's connected onto the internet, and it goes off to another location far away. It's told to come out there, and a mobile station there can hear them. So that's all about Echolink. You can't join Echolink until you are licensed. Before you use Echolink, you must register your call sign and even provide a copy of your license to the Echolink organization so that they can certify that you're authorized to use it. Otherwise, I give out links and whatnot and tell you just listen to repeaters using Echolink, but you can't do that. You can't have that capability until you are licensed. Now, the other system I mentioned is the Internet Radio Linking Project. I'm not as familiar with them, but I do know that here in South Carolina, there's a group of repeaters, the SC Hart system, and they use the IRLP system to link some of their analog repeaters. So how do you find out, who's linked and where do they go and whatnot? Well, again, you can use repeater directory books that the ARRL comes out with. You can use repeaterbook.com or the apps for Apple or Android. There's online services you can subscribe to called RF Finder. Or in your area, find out who the frequency coordinator is for repeaters, and it's the Southeastern Repeater Association for South Carolina, and they have a URL here where you can look up all the information about repeaters in your area. So I mentioned when I got started in amateur radio, it was all about high frequencies, that 3 to 30 megahertz. And so that's what I learned about first, because it was very difficult for hams back in the 1970s to get on VHF. It required more sophisticated radios, and vacuum tubes and whatnot didn't work very well up at VHF, so they typically take commercial radios and modify them. So HF, a lot of our traditions and the things that we do in amateur radio come from telegraphy. Landline telegraphy was the first. Samuel Morse, What Has God Wrought? And so ham radio uses the traditions of wireline telegraphy and then radio telegraphy as well. And even you'll hear that used in voice communications. So when we want to get on a high frequency, let's say in the 40-meter band on 7.150, in the middle of it, you'd have to have your general class license to be able to do this. But this is an example. So again, first thing, listen. And do you hear anybody on the frequency? Okay, not. Then you ask, if you're using voice, is the frequency in use? Is the frequency in use, please? Or if you're sending Morse code, Gary, I thought we didn't have to know Morse code. No, you don't have to know Morse code, but the FCC wants you to know about the procedures. So if you were to be using Morse code, you would send the letters QRL ? And that's the same thing as asking, is the frequency in use? And generally, you follow that with your call sign. If no one comes back to you, if no one says, yep, no one's there, use the color chart and the band plans, make sure you're where you want to be, and then you're good to go to call CQ. CQ is a general call that I'd like to talk to any amateur radio operator. Little tidbit of trivia here. Before SOS became the International Telegrapher's symbol for an emergency, the symbol was CQD. You'd send CQ and then D for distress. But then they moved to the SOS system. So if you're going to call CQ looking for any other ham to come back to you, in Morse code you would send the letters CQ, 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 or da 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 da. Then you would send the French word for from, which is DE, da 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 da, and then you would send your call sign. This is one of my old call signs, KE8NW, and then you would send the letter K, da da da, which is on Morse code, that's over to the other station. And then if somebody heard you and wanted to come back, they would send your call sign, a couple times usually, from, and then their call sign. So this is the start of a Morse code conversation on the high frequency bands, or even on VHF and UHF. Now, if you're not going to be using Morse code, if you're going to be calling on voice, we say the same thing. CQ, CQ, CQ from Kilowatt Echo 8 November Whiskey, KE8NW, over. So you can see where we took that from Morse code and have kind of adapted it over to voice. So if you monitor the bands using software-defined radios, etc., you'll hear conversations like this. And the response would again be your call sign coming back to you, and then their call sign, and then a conversation can begin. So when you're calling another station, you know their call sign, you can just send their call sign in Morse code from, and then your call sign. With high frequency voice, you just say it. On a repeater, as we talked about before, you don't have to call CQ to check in, just throw out your call sign, that's enough. Or if you know the other person's call sign, just say it. ND7J, here is Whiskey for Echo, Echo Yankee. So I mentioned a QSY. That's a telegrapher's code. Telegraphers were all about shortening things down and making things compact so that they didn't have to, send Morse code a lot. So they adopted some codes that meant common things. QSY for radio telegraphy means change frequency. Well, Q signals can be a statement or a question. It all depends on whether there's a question mark, sent after it. And so here are the Q signals that I'd like you to be aware of. QRM, M standing in my mind for man-made. QRM is man-made interference. I'm receiving interference. I'm receiving QRM. QRN is natural interference, usually lightning, static crashes. So you're receiving natural interference. So maybe it's, I couldn't hear you because I had QRN. QTH, that's your home, that's your location, that's where you are. My QTH is in Pendleton, South Carolina. QSB is an interesting one. It's the multipath effects on high frequency, signal fading up and signal fading down. That's varying signal strength, QS Baker, QSB. We talked about QSY, that's changing frequency. QSL is a statement about confirmation. My name is Gary, QSL, meaning did you get it? Yes, I got it, Gary, that sounds great. And QRZ, you'll hear this a lot with DX stations who are again trying to abbreviate things. They're looking for their next station, their next contact, QRZ. And we say Z, not Z, so QRZ. Do you have anything for me, or is there another station that is calling me? So I told you I'm in Pendleton, South Carolina, but we also have another way that we locate where we are, and that's called the Maidenhead Locator System. There are, I've forgotten how many now, but 324 Maidenhead locations, Maidenhead locations around the world. It starts at Greenwich, England, and works its way around. And so you will also have a location where your QTH is. My old QTH, when I used to live in Greenville County, was Echo Mike 85. That was my grid locator. This was my house right here. And here's the latitude and longitude, and there are apps that can tell you what your Maidenhead location would be. Here in Anderson County, where I am right now, I'm in Echo Mike 84. I moved over slightly south and to the west. All right, those are Maidenhead or grid locators. New topic. So this is something that I kind of hate to talk about, but come back to me just for a second, Marion, if you would. In any group of people, you're going to get those who are, on top of things and are adults and everybody's responsible. And then you have children, folks that never really grew up. Well, unfortunately, it's true in amateur radio as well. There are some operators who have been able to pass their test, but they're kind of irresponsible. And where this shows up in many cases is, we talked about QRM, man-made interference. Well, deliberate QRM or DQRM. And this really pops up when there's a rare DX station on the air, and maybe this station has tried to work them and they can't. The other station can't hear them, so they childlessly say, well, if I can't work them, then nobody can work them, and I'm going to interfere with everybody. It happens, unfortunately. My suggestion is QSY, come back to it later. But I want you to know there's a story, come back to the slide just for a second. DQRM is deliberate interference with another station. It is not allowed. It is illegal. The FCC will cite you for this. And I want to point out that in a lot of the three-letter agencies, NSA, CIA, FBI, are ham radio operators. Also overseas, Interpol and whatnot. There's a case of an Italian amateur radio operator who was doing his little childish thing, making interference to a DXpedition. And I don't know the exact nature, but they used direction finding techniques to locate him. And they actually located his house. And they actually knocked on the door. And I don't know what words were spoken, but essentially they said, knock it off. He did. So don't do that. Just, it's not worth it. And hopefully if it's a major incident or whatnot, there are these folks that are working on this using direction finding techniques. Now you, in your local club, may also want to investigate direction finding, and you can actually, it's a hobby, within a hobby. You can have fox hunts. at public parks and things like this, where you try to find the Fox. So what's a Fox? It's a hidden radio transmitter operating on very low power levels, and you're out there with your radio and a directional antenna of some kind, and you're listening and you're trying to find out in which direction is, oh, I think it's over there. Let's go that way. Does the signal strength get greater? So direction finding using directional antennas, fox hunting. That's a hobby within the hobby. Another hobby within the hobby, something that I like to do, is contesting. A contest is where you contact as many stations as you can during a limited amount of time, 24 hours or 48 hours. Each contact has a specific exchange that you share with the other station, and you put it into your log, and most folks will use computer logging. Each contest has their own rules, so you want to go online ahead of time and read the rules. The biggest amateur radio contest annually is coming up at the end of this month. It is the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. The bands will be packed, and I'm going to be there because I love this contest. It's great. So you can just work hundreds and hundreds of international contests on the HF bands, and this is a single sideband contest. They also have CW, Morse code contests. They also have radio teletype contests. There's all sorts of different things. There's VHF and UHF contests. So if this kind of intrigues you, find somebody in your club who's a contester right now and say, hey, could I come over and just sit in and watch? And most of the time they'll say, yeah, come on over. And you might get the bug. You might find it interesting. All right, one of my previous jobs was working as an engineer at a local TV station. And back in the day, we used analog television. One of our students mentioned before we got started, they're refurbishing an old Philco classic TV. Well, this used the old NTSC analog standard, fast scan. And it's used still in amateur radio, fast scan amateur television. So it's called NTSC. It stands for the National Television Systems Committee. But back when I was an engineer, we called it never twice the same color because sometimes we had troubles. Okay, more questions. What is the national calling frequency for FM simplex operation in the 2-meter band?
Alpha.
You hear that? Alpha 146.52 megahertz. That's in the 2-meter band.
Alpha.
Yep, it is alpha. And what is an appropriate way to call another station on a repeater if you know the other station's call sign?
Bravo. Bravo.
Yeah, okay, I want to make sure we got everybody there. Yep, Bravo, say the station's call sign, then identify with your call sign. And how should you respond to a station calling CQ?
Bravo.
Not Bravo.
Charlie.
Charlie, you transmit the other station's call sign. They've been calling and giving you their call sign. So you transmit it so that they wake up and say, oh, that's my call sign, followed then by your call sign. And we say there's nothing sweeter than the sound of your own call sign coming back to you. So what is the meaning of the procedural signal CQ?
Delta.
Delta.
Yeah, calling any station, anywhere. And which of the following indicates that a station is listening on a repeater and looking for a contact?
Bravo.
Bravo.
It's when somebody's checking in, yeah, their station's call sign, followed by the word monitoring or listening. And remember that radio repeaters are not private. They're like the old telephone party lines. I mean, anybody who's listening on frequency will hear your conversation. All right, what should you do before calling CQ?
Alpha.
Well, alpha is true.
Delta.
All these are correct.
Yeah, listen first, ask if the frequency is in use, or QRL question mark, And make sure you are authorized to use that frequency, all of those choices. So how is a VHF-UHF transceiver's reverse function used?
Charlie.
Charlie,
It's used to listen on a repeater's input frequency to see if you can hear the other station direct. And if that's the case, then you could maybe move off to a simplex frequency. So why are simplex channels designated in the VHF and UHF band plans?
alpha,
Alpha.
Yes, indeed. So stations, alpha, within range of each other can communicate without tying up a repeater. So which Q signal indicates you are receiving interference from other stations?
alpha,
Alpha.
Man-made interference, QRM. And which Q signal indicates you are changing frequency?
Bravo,
Bravo.
Yep, the big knob, QSY, changing frequency. And what might be a problem if your receiver report that your audio signal through the repeater is distorted or unintelligible? Read carefully.
Delta.
delta,
The transmitter is slightly off frequency, you didn't program it right, or your batteries are low, or you're in a bad location, you're off your X, yeah, all of those choices. So which of the following methods is used to locate sources of noise interference or jamming?
Charlie,
Charlie.
That's radio direction finding with directional antennas. And which of these items could be or would be useful for a hidden transmitter hunt?
Bravo.
Bravo,
Yeah, a directional antenna. Yeah. And what operating activity involves contacting as many stations as possible during a specified period?
Delta.
delta,
That's contesting. And which of the following is good procedure when contacting another station in a contest?
Charlie.
Charlie,
I didn't specifically say this, but you've got it. Charlie, send only the minimum information needed for proper identification and the contest exchange. They don't need to know about, your QTH and your transmitter type and your antennas. When in a contest, they're all about making a lot of contacts. So they only want the minimum required information. Good. So what is a grid locator?
alpha,
Alpha.
Yeah, it's a letter number designator, EM85. No, where was I? Echo Mike 84, I think is where I am now. But anyway, yeah, that's a letter number designator assigned to a geographic location. All right, so what type of transmission is indicated by the term NTSC?
Charlie,
Yep,
Charlie.
that's the old analog fast scan color TV standard. Yes, indeed. All right, one more here. Using repeaters, and then we'll take a break. So repeaters, as we mentioned before, you're talking up to the repeater on one frequency and coming down on another frequency. And those frequencies aren't arbitrary. There's a standard, and the typical standard repeater offset for a 2-meter repeater is plus or minus 600 kilohertz. The standard for a 70-centimeter repeater is plus or minus 5 megahertz. Now there are some repeaters, not so many anymore, but that have non-standard offsets. But you can find out this information in the Repeater Book app or in the ARRL repeater handbook that they come out with. But this is the standard. For 2 meters, 600 kilohertz apart, and for 70 centimeters, 5 megahertz apart. And the repeater is going to be using carrier-operated squelch so that it's not transmitting unless a signal is heard on its input. That's the bare minimum. If you're listening on a repeater's output frequency, you probably won't hear anything until somebody transmits on its input frequency. Now, there's other types of squelch. There's controlled access squelch. Some repeaters require a subaudible tone called CTCSS in order to have them turn on. Your little HT, even the $30 TID radio ones, can do this. They can generate these subaudible tones, but you need to know what the tone would be. You can find that out at your local ham club or in the books that we've talked about. Some repeaters use a digital coded squelch tone to activate it. Not so many, but it's possible. And in Europe, some repeaters require a 1750 hertz tone burst in order to activate. So if your radio is not set up properly with the controlled access tone, then you won't be able to get into the repeater. So that's a common problem people will have when they're programming new HTs, especially for the first time. You've got to get this right, or the repeater will just sit there, do nothing, and you'll go, what's wrong? And those subaudible tones, they're audio tones but below voice frequencies. Here's a table of those. So, around 100 hertz plus or minus. Digital coded squelch codes, here are some of those. It's a 23-bit digital pattern that might be sent. And you can find all this information in a repeater directory or the apps that we mentioned earlier. So we've been talking about FM and FM repeaters, but I want you to know that there are also some different flavors of digital radio out there as well that's being used by amateur radio operators. One is called DMR, and it's a European telecommunications standard that is used commercially by Motorola. And here in the upstate of South Carolina, it's one of the most popular digital voice modes, active on VHF and UHF, primarily UHF. And there are two other digital modes that are popular in amateur radio. That's D-Star and Yaesu Fusion. We'll talk about those here in just a second. With DMR, digital mobile radio, you have to you can buy a radio, but before you can use the radio, you have to go online and you have to register and get your own radio ID registration that is linked to your name and your call sign. And that has to be programmed into the radio, this DMR ID. You will have a unique ID that you will carry for the rest of your life. So that's programmed into the radio. The radio will not work if you don't have a valid DMR ID. And this is the URL here that you would go to in order. It's free, but you have to go online and register for that. Go to your local ham club and find out, is digital voice active here in this area? And what flavor? Is it DMR? Is it D-Star? Is it Yaesu? And then find somebody who's doing it, because they can help you through a lot of pitfalls. DMR is difficult in my experience. There are some resources here, some URLs that you can go take a look at. You have to create for each radio something called a code plug. And the code plug contains your digital radio ID, but it also contains information about the radio repeaters in your area, access codes, sometimes they're color codes for access, different things. Here's a video online from Ham Radio 2.0 about code plugs from DMR. Oh my gosh, now understand it's a very, very powerful system. This is the kind of system that your public safety group is using for a police department, for a fire department. And what it does is it provides interoperability. Because they had a real problem, especially with terrorism and things like that, that the FBI couldn't talk to local police because they're on completely different radio systems. Well, now with a system like DMR, they can set up talk groups where both can join in. And so local police can talk to FBI or talk to the fire department. And so it's very versatile, very powerful, but with that comes complexity. I don't want to scare you off, but I just want you to be aware of that. So with DMR, they have linked repeaters, very much like we talked about with Echolink and IRLP. They're digitally linked. There also are talk groups that cover a region, for example, and it's a 4-digit number that identifies the talk group. DMR is unique in that there's one radio channel that's 12.5 kilohertz wide, but two voice communications can go on at the same time. Well, not exactly the same time. They have different time slots. And the radio, when you first turn it on, will synchronize in time with the repeater. And from then on, it will know, am I supposed to be operating in time slot 1 or am I supposed to be operating in time slot 2? Access control, as I mentioned, could be done by a color code. Green, you have to code this repeater for green, or have to code this repeater for blue. Digital talk groups, if you want to talk to radio repeaters, DMR repeaters in the southeast, you can put in this number, 3174, in your radio, and boom, you'll come out on repeaters in that area. And DMR, as I mentioned, uses time division multiple access, time slots. So if you see time slots, you know that they're talking about DMR. It's the only one of the 3 digital modes that uses this technology. Now, another family of digital radio is the one sponsored by ICOM and the Japanese Amateur Radio League, JARL. It's called D-Star, and not only ICOM but Kenwood and some other manufacturers sell D-Star radios. It too uses the internet to link radio systems together. They have talk groups and all of the other things that we've talked about there. It's much easier to use, although I have no direct experience with D-Star because there are no D-Star repeaters here in the upstate of South Carolina, so I haven't actually had the opportunity to delve into it. Here is a video on D-Star for Dummies. Now, one difference between D-Star and DMR, in DMR you had that DMR ID that you had to sign up for. Well, in D-Star, your call sign is your identity. And also here's a link, the Newbie's Guide to Using D-Star. If you know, talk to the folks in your club, is D-Star being used here? Find somebody who's using it and learn more about it, whether it's for you or not. And then finally, Yaesu Fusion, which again I didn't have a lot of experience with except the local club, which I'm also a member of the Anderson Radio Club, has a Yaesu Fusion repeater that they put on the air. And so I said, well, I could experiment with this. And I find it very easy to use. It's more complex than an FM radio, but it's still very enticing. And the thing is, you can talk to hams from around the world using just a small HT. We're going to try to do some contacts later tonight in a live demo, fingers crossed. Now, with Yaesu Fusion, if your local hub has a C4FM, that's the modulation technique, a repeater, then you can use your Yaesu Fusion radio through the repeater, or you could actually activate something called a hotspot. This is a personal low-powered radio repeater that links your QTH, your house, to the internet directly. So you don't have to work with a repeater put on by a club or something like that. So hotspots, it's a combination of hardware and firmware and software that enables an amateur radio enthusiast with internet connectivity to link directly to digital voice systems around the world. And so here we are with our demo. We're going to try this out here in just a sec. We're going to be using 2 radios. The TID Radio H3, which you'll see here in just a minute, which is an FM radio for VHF and UHF. These are the ones that sell for about $30 on Amazon. I've measured the harmonic output and spurious emissions on VHF on the TID radio, which is where the problem usually lies, and they're clean. They're a really good radio. And then the Yaesu FT70D, which we'll use on Yaesu Fusion and talk to my hotspot that I have downstairs in my workshop. And so let me walk over to the demonstration area over here. So with a live demo, you never really know, is this going to work or isn't it? But we'll give it a shot. We were very lucky the last time we did this that everything worked out. Now, this is the TID Radio H3 that I have right here. This is an analog FM radio. I want to point out something. This is the antenna that comes with it. And note its length as compared to the antenna that I have on it. And that is all about range. These longer antennas can give you better range. And when I checked this morning, the local Anderson UHF repeater was up and running. But I don't know if it'll be up and running tonight, but let's see. So what I'm going to do is I've got the radio here. I'm going to hold it close to my microphone so you should be able to hear things here. Okay, did you hear that little bloopy bloop? That means the repeater is up. I heard my signal. Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee here, doing a demonstration of amateur radio. Is there someone on frequency who might be able to come back briefly and just talk so we can hear it? Doing a live demonstration of amateur radio. This is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Gary, wonder if anybody could come back and just help me with this demonstration. You notice I gave my call sign so that folks know who I am. I've identified. I stated the purpose of my transmission.
NSH, I hear your signal. Can you give me your call, please?
Yes, Roger, and thank you very much for coming back. The name here is Gary, Golf Alpha Romeo Yankee. The call sign is Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee, and the QTH is in Pendleton, South Carolina. Over.
W4EY. Hope things are going well for you. Are you on a new transmitter, new antenna, or all of the above?
Well, what I'm using here for this demonstration is the small TID Radio H3. It's a 5-watt UHF handheld with I think it's a diamond antenna, and just doing a live class for amateur radio, teaching folks about the technician class, and wanted to demonstrate an analog repeater.
That, and just in case you do have the time at the top of the hour, 8 o'clock, there'll be a net, and you can check into that net, and you would hear a lot of transmissions back and forth. They generally run 20 folks or more. This is W4NSH, back to W4EY.
Okay, W4NSH, very good. I didn't catch your name. Your name, please?
It's Roy, Romeo Oscar Yankee, and I'm located in Clayton, Georgia.
Fine business. Well, nice to make your acquaintance. I won't hold it with you, but we've made our demonstration here, and the students have had a chance to hear how the repeater works, and I appreciate your help tonight. W4NSH from Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee 73.
EEY, W4NSH. It was indeed a pleasure. 73. Have a great evening, and don't forget the 8 o'clock net is Goodbye.
All right. It worked. So there's a contact on the local Anderson UHF repeater, their analog FM repeater, to a station in Georgia. So repeaters can give you additional range. So the next radio I'd like to demonstrate, we'll see how this works. This is the Yaesu FT70D. It's a Yaesu Fusion radio that will be talking to my hotspot that is located downstairs in my workshop, which is connected to a talk group on the Yaesu Fusion system called Kansas City Wide. And actually there are stations from all over the world that can check into this group, and I've heard stations from Japan and England and whatever. So we'll turn the radio on and then we'll listen, see if it's busy. If I remember how to turn it on. There. Okay, there's no conversations going on, that's good. This is Whiskey for Echo Echo Yankee with a demonstration of the Yaesu Fusion system. Is there somebody that could come back to me? Whiskey for Echo Echo Yankee in South Carolina.
Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee Victor Echo 6 Tango Zulu Delta Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. Operator name is Gary. Copy QSL.
Well, that's convenient because my name is Gary also, Golf Alpha Romeo Yankee. Fine business. Just doing a demonstration during a class here for technicians, and wanted to demonstrate the difference between an FM radio, which we just did, here to the Yaesu Fusion system. Great to know that you're coming in from Saskatchewan, and nice to make your acquaintance.
Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee. Good afternoon, Gary. Gary here, Victor Echo 6 Tango Zulu Delta. I'm situated in the province of Alberta. The city name is Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, just outside the capital of Edmonton. And 73 to everyone in the from Alberta here. Victor Echo 6 Tango Zulu Delta. Microphone back to you.
All right, Tango Zulu Delta, fine business. Appreciate the contact today. I won't hold it, and we'll return the repeater for normal use, but I do appreciate it very much. This is Whiskey for Echo Echo Yankee. I'll be clear. Okay.
Whiskey 4 Echo Echo Yankee 73 Victor Echo 6 Tango Zulu Delta. I'll be clear and standing by.
So that's kind of cool. A little handheld radio that I was just able to make a contact here from the studio and going all the way to Canada. And you too, when you get your technician license, would have the authority and ability to do this very same thing. So I just wanted to get you a little excited about that. All right, let's move back on over to the pod. Yay, it worked. So we talked about linked repeaters, just to recap, that both analog and digital repeaters, FM and D-Star or Yaesu Fusion, can be linked. And linked repeaters, if we come back to the laptop for me, is a network of repeaters where signals received by one are transmitted by all. Just know that definition for linked repeaters. And it's always good to know your radio. We talked about the reverse button. Also know about channel scanning, the ability to skip channels in memory if you're scanning memory channels and you don't want that one to appear all the time. Learn how to program that. And there's something called frequency range scanning in a lot of radios, where you can actually listen to the entire band and you can find local activity that you might not know is there. So that's called frequency range scanning. Okay, we've got some questions. Let's see how we do, and then we can take a break. So what is a common repeater frequency offset in the 2-meter band?
Bravo.
Yes, the standard is plus or minus 600 kilohertz. And what is the common repeater frequency offset in the 70 centimeter band?
Alpha.
Yes, plus or minus 5 megahertz. Great job. And what is meant by repeater offset?
Bravo.
Alpha.
Alpha.
It is alpha. It's the difference between a repeater's transmit and receive frequencies, the offset. And what term describes the use of a subaudible tone transmitted along with normal voice audio to open the squelch of a receiver?
Delta.
Delta.
Yes, CTCSS. And which of the following describes a linked repeater network?
Alpha.
Alpha.
It is indeed alpha. It's a network of repeaters in which signals received by one repeater are transmitted by all the repeaters. And which of the following could be the reason you are unable to access a repeater whose output you can hear?
Delta.
Delta.
It is delta. You could have an improper transceiver offset, or you could have programmed the wrong CTCSS tone, or if it uses it, you could have the wrong DCS code, so all of those. All right. So what type of signaling uses pairs of audio tones?
Alpha.
Alpha.
Courtesy of Ma Bell, dual tone multi-frequency, DTMF. And how can you join a digital repeater's talk group?
Charlie.
It is.
Charlie.
Program your radio with the group's ID or code. And what is the purpose of the color code used on DMR repeater systems?
Alpha.
It's access control. Yes, you must match that color in order to get access to a DMR repeater. And what function is performed with a transceiver and a digital mode hotspot?
Alpha.
Ye-
We just did it.
We just did it. Communication using digital voice or data via the internet. So it went down to my hotspot, then it went on to the internet, then went to the Kansas City wide group, which actually has repeaters in Kansas City, but then it also went to Canada via the internet and came up probably in a repeater or a hotspot there. So what does the scanning function of an FM transceiver do?
Charlie. Charlie.
This would be frequency scanning, so it tunes through a range of frequencies to check for activity. And what does a DMR code plug contain?
Bravo.
Bravo.
Very good, yes, it's the access information you need for repeaters and talk groups. And how is a specific group of stations selected on a digital voice transceiver?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Yes, by entering the group's identification code. You saw the one for the southeast of the United States, for example. And which of the following must be programmed into a D-Star digital transceiver before transmitting? It's the first thing when you turn the radio on, it'll ask you.
Alpha.
Alpha.
Your call sign. Your call sign is your ID in D-Star. And how is over-the-air access to IRLP nodes accomplished?
Bravo.
Bravo.
It is Bravo. You've got to know, you've got to talk to somebody in your club or whatever who's maintaining the repeater. What are the codes, the DTMF signals I need to enter in order to make it come out in Dallas, for example? And what is voice over IP protocol?
Delta.
Yes,
Delta.
it's a method of delivering voice communications over the internet using digital techniques. And what is the Internet Radio Linking Project?
Alpha.
Alpha.
It-
Bravo.
Not websites. It is alpha. It's a technique to connect amateur radio systems, such as repeaters, via the internet using voice over IP. It's akin to Echolink. Echolink is the other system. And which of the following protocols enables an amateur station to transmit through a repeater without using a radio to initiate the transmission? I didn't tell you this, so this is my fault. Echolink has an app. You can put it on your smartphone. Once you've signed up with Echolink, you don't even need a radio. You can dial into a repeater using their app. So I'll give you this one. It's Echolink. So what is required before using the Echolink system?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Yeah, you have to register your call sign and you will have to provide them proof of license. And what is a talk group on a DMR repeater?
Bravo.
Yes, remember DMR uses time division multiple access, and it is a way for groups of users to share a channel at different times without hearing other users on that very same channel. They're operating at a different time slot. And which of the following describes DMR?
Alpha.
It is alpha. It's a technique for time multiplexing two digital voice signals on a single 12.5 kilohertz repeater channel. Ladies and gentlemen, you done good. You did great, actually. You deserve your 5-minute break. So let's take 5 minutes, get up, move around, stretch, and we'll come back and we'll complete the last sections of Chapter 6.
Brad, can you hear me?
And we're back. There we are. Very good. Well, you've done great in the first half of this chapter. There's a lot of information, and I'm proud of you, really, I am. And did you hear they were talking about, when we were talking on the Anderson UHF repeater, they were talking about a net that was coming up at 8 o'clock? Yeah, 8 o'clock. And we're not going to participate in that, but that's what we're going to talk about next. Nets. Nets are groupings of amateur radio operators that can get together for a purpose or just socially on the air. So, Marion, if you would take the laptop, please. Here we are, section 6.4, nets. And when you're going to check into a net, just know that some nets are formal and others are what we call informal. Formal nets are going to have a network control station, and you'll always need to follow the network control station's rules. He or she is the boss. So you don't transmit until they say you can transmit. And if you think you might want to participate in a net, what I would say is listen first. That's what I always say, listen, 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 and you'll learn about the procedures of the net and how to check in and what they expect you to say. Now, nets are wonderful for emergencies, because if you know when a net operates and on what frequency range, and if you've got a problem, you can check into a net and have them handle your emergency. All you need to do is tell net control, this is priority or emergency traffic, followed by your call sign, and they will suspend the net and then help you as best they can with whatever the issue is that you're experiencing. And the most important thing that you can share over the radio is your location. If you're in an emergency situation, they can't get help to you unless they know your location. So nets are one avenue of communication with other hams. Another is something that has a tradition going back to wire telegraphy, telegrams. We don't send and receive telegrams much anymore, but it used to be a big thing. In fact, even for vacations, if you wanted to send a tour rate telegram back, it only cost you 35 cents. Okay. And the ham radio community actually got involved in sending telegrams or radiograms. And it had to do with the original radio stations back in the 1920s typically had a range, they could only probably communicate out to about 25 miles. So if you wanted to get a message across country, it had to go from station to station to station to station. When it finally reached the opposite side, you hoped that the message would get there intact. So a radiogram is also known as traffic. And there is a national traffic system that still exists today. There are traffic nets that are on high frequencies and VHF, UHF. They operate with single sideband, with Morse code and radio teletype. And the whole point is to still carry telegraphic messages from point to point. And they're called radiograms. And in the radiogram, there's a preamble that gives each message a unique identity, and it has a unique number assigned to the precedence. Is it routine? Is it health and welfare? Any handling instructions? The station of origin, where it actually originated. There's a check, which is the number of word or word equivalents in the text of the radiogram. The place of the origin, the date and time, the address of where it's finally going, maybe even a telephone number so that it could be phoned to the final distance. But here's the major rule about traffic handling. Messages should be transmitted exactly as received. Don't make corrections. If you think it's misspelled, send it as misspelled. That's how you do it. And so here's an ARRL radiogram blank. You can still buy these. And you look there, the preamble line is on the top there, and there's the check number is 12. So that means there are 12 words or word equivalents in this message. and this would then be transmitted via the national traffic system to its place of destination. I've received radiograms from students who've figured out how to do this, so it is entirely possible. And if you're going to be sending messages on traffic on voice, something that is highly recommended is to use the phonetic alphabet, the International Telecommunications Union Standard Phonetic Alphabet, because spelling out proper names or unusual words using the phonetic alphabet prevents confusion and mistakes. Okay, here's some questions. Which of the following are typical duties of a net control station?
Charlie,
It is Charlie, calling the net to order and directing communication between stations who are checking in during the net. And what technique is used to ensure that voice messages containing unusual words are received correctly?
Charlie.
Charlie,
Yep, spell words out using a standard phonetic alphabet. And what does the term traffic refer to in net operation?
Alpha,
Yeah, traffic is messages that are exchanged by the net stations. And which of the following is standard practice when you participate in a net?
Charlie,
Exactly. The net control station is the boss, so unless you're reporting an emergency, transmit only when directed by the net control station. They'll get around to you. And which of the following is a characteristic of good traffic handling?
Alpha,
Passing messages exactly as received. And what information is contained in the preamble of a formal traffic message?
Bravo,
Not Bravo.
Delta.
It's Delta, all of the information that's necessary to track the message. Please stand by. I'm looking for an app on my phone. It is getting very warm here in the control room, in the studio. And I want to see.
Remote's not responding temperature-wise.
Okay, there's the studio air conditioner. Stand by. All right.
There you go, 70.
And I'm going to turn the fan up to high. All right. Hopefully, we'll get a little cooler in here. All right. Thank you for that interlude. All right, here's the next question. What is meant by check in a radiogram header?
Alpha,
Alpha.
Yeah, it's the number of word or word equivalents. All right. Section 6.5, communications for public service. A lot of folks get involved in amateur radio for this very reason. There are 2 amateur radio groups that deal with emergency communications, and then one that is weather related that is active here in the upstate of South Carolina. RACES is the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. ARES is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. And then Skywarn is a group of storm spotters that interface with the National Weather Service to give them on-the-spot weather reports and reports of damage, etc. No matter what you're doing in any of these organizations, you must always abide by FCC rules. FCC rules always apply. So let's talk about RACES. RACES is an organization that uses amateur stations, that uses amateur operators, and uses amateur frequencies for civil defense communications. So when you see the C in RACES, that stands for civil defense. And operators are RACES certified by their local civil defense organization. They still exist, and so you get training and certification from this local group. And RACES is part of the FCC Amateur Radio Regulations, Part 97. So it's an official part of our rules. Aries, on the other hand, is more regional or state-based. It's licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty in the public service. And they're probably going to be sent out during times of inclement weather or disasters, aiding third-party organizations like the Red Cross, things like that, in emergency situations. So we talked about RACES, civil defense, ARES, folks who voluntarily register their qualifications and equipment for regional help, and then Skywarn, the last group, they're storm spotters who are affiliated with the National Weather Service. Here in the upstate of South Carolina, we have a National Weather Service office at our Greenville, South Carolina airport, and they have an amateur radio station there, so they actually receive direct reports from amateurs around upstate. So in emergency situations, and we had Hurricane Helene that came through this area about a year ago, this is a part of the FCC rules. When the safety of human life and the protection of property is involved, you may operate outside the frequency privileges of your license. So if a net was meeting and it was in a general class portion of the band, but you only have your technician class license, but you're in an emergency situation, go for it. Check into the general class net, tell them your situation. Now, I get the question from students in the past, not so much anymore, but, well, could I transmit on police frequencies? Well, number one, police frequencies are all DMR type radio systems anymore that you could not break into anyway. They're not analog FM. But if you could, by the FCC rules, yes. If there's no other means available, if the cell phone systems are down, if that's the only way you could possibly get information out and you had to come up on the local fire department frequency and inform them of an emergency situation, yes, by FCC rules you could do it, but you would have some splaining to do in the end. You'd have to tell folks, well, you know, there really wasn't any other way that I could do this. But if you got the gumption, you could do it. All right, questions? So what is the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service? Shall I say read carefully? Charlie is correct.
I'm just reading them all now.
Yep, that's fine.
All Delta.
Yeah, it's a radio service using amateur frequencies, check. A radio service using amateur stations, check. An emergency service using amateur operators that are certified by a civil defense organization, check. All of those are correct. And when do FCC rules not apply to the operation of an amateur station?
Delta.
Yeah, FCC rules always apply. And what is RACES?
Delta.
Yep, it's Civil Defense Communications, the C, and they're part 97 in the rules and during national civil defense emergencies. And what is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service?
Alpha.
Alpha.
Yes, it is a group of licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty in the public service. Are amateur station control operators ever permitted to operate outside the frequency privileges of their license class?
Delta.
Delta.
Yes, only in situations involving the immediate safety of human life or the protection of property. All right, our last section, satellites. So amateur space stations or orbiting satellites, the FCC that a space station is anything located 50 kilometers above the Earth. So that's an amateur space station. 50 kilometers or higher. Amateur satellites may be controlled by any amateur whose license allows transmission on the uplink frequency. And it's always good practice to use the minimum power necessary to communicate to a satellite. And the purpose of amateur satellites is to contact other amateurs on the ground at distant locations. Now, each orbiting satellite typically carries beacon signals. They're signals from the satellite that may contain telemetry regarding the health and the status of the satellite. And also, some amateur radio satellites carry packet radio. And so data signals may be sent and received and stored and forwarded to other stations via packet radio. Now, geostationary orbit is where most communications satellites are. They're parked, I think it's 22,000 kilometers up over the equator, and they appear to be stationary in the sky to Earth stations. There is an amateur radio satellite, one that Qatar put up, and it covers, you can see here, Africa and Europe. And that's the footprint of this geostationary amateur radio satellite. We're over here, so we can't participate in using this satellite. But we do have other satellites that we can participate, and these are low Earth orbit satellites. And low Earth orbit satellites, as you see, are in orbit around the Earth from north to south and south to north. And we have to track them in azimuth and elevation. So the amateur satellites that we can use are all LEOs. You use computer programs to determine the azimuth and elevation when the satellite's going to come up over the horizon. And you use Keplerian data, this is information about where the satellite is in time and space. You input that into the program that you're using. There's Doppler shift. You think about an oncoming train. It's a shift in frequency or pitch caused by motion. Most amateur radio satellites are either UV mode or VU mode. What that means is you uplink to the satellite on UHF and receive from the satellite on VHF, or you uplink to the satellite on VHF and you downlink on UHF. Use transponders that translate from one frequency band to another. A lot of amateur satellites are stabilized by rotating the satellite, called spin fading. We'll see that here in a second. And we mentioned earlier that a lot of satellites, amateur satellites, carry packet radio. And your Earth station can be as simple as this. A handheld radio, a directional antenna that you're holding and pointing in the right direction of azimuth and elevation. And modulation on the satellites includes FM, single sideband, Morse code, and packet radio. And we talked about the modes again, the VU and the UV. No, that's the uplink and the downlink frequency ranges. Here's spin stabilization. You can see the satellite is rotating there. Now, not only is the satellite rotating and the solar cells are rotating, but its antennas are also rotating. And if you use linearly polarized antennas, horizontal or vertical, the signal strength will come up and down and up and down and up and down as the satellite spins. So to counteract that, we use circularly polarized antennas. This helical antenna here, for example, and that minimizes signal fading by using circularly polarized antennas. And I mentioned you want to use the minimum power necessary. Well, how do you know that? Well, you monitor the downlink band from a satellite using a small SDR play or some other kind of SDR radio that you can see the entire spectrum, and you look for a beacon signal from the satellite, and then you try to match that level. Now remember, when you're transmitting up to a satellite in either VHF or UHF, you're sending your call sign. So people know who you are. Don't be a satellite power hog, because if you are, you'll block others from using the satellite transponder. It only has solar cells and batteries, so you always want to keep your power moderate. And I think we all know what the Doppler effect is. It's a change in wavelength caused by the motion of the energy source. So we'll see if we can play it out here. I've got to take off my laser pointer. There we go. This is Doppler. Hang on, here we go. Hear it again? So that's in the audio range, but the same thing happens with satellites. It's a change in wavelength caused by the motion of the energy source. So it was postulated that satellites, before we had satellites, that this would happen with their carrier frequencies as well, but it was really not known for sure until the Russians on October 4th, 1957, put up Sputnik. Sputnik was the first man-made orbiting satellite, and it carried a radio transmitter. And amateur radio was highly involved in this in the United States in monitoring. There was a great article in the October 2022 CQ magazine on the St. Joseph High Radio Club. They were involved in monitoring Sputnik. They were actually faster than the United States Navy. They were 4 hours faster by monitoring and recording the signals coming from Sputnik. And they recorded hours and hours of reception. It was actually transmitting on 20.005 megahertz, very near to WWV, the time signal on 20 megahertz. It was very easy for 15-meter antennas to capture the signal. So I'm going to go ahead on Zoom here, and I'm going to turn off some of the noise reduction that Zoom has, and we're going to listen to a little bit of Sputnik. I want you to listen for when the pitch changes. Coming. There, you hear it? It went down in pitch. The satellite was approaching them up until that point, and then it was going away. And as it was going away, then the carrier frequency went down as well. So this was proof of Doppler shift in satellites. And it's something that we have to deal with today. If you're going to be tracking a satellite in low Earth orbit, you have to know about it, and you may, on your radio, have to compensate for it as well. So again, we talk about the St. Joseph High Radio Club. Mike Stimac was their counselor and the guy that got them started. Well, he passed away about a year ago. So in honor of him, they have a website up that talks about how much a visionary he was in that regard. And if you would like to get involved in satellite operations, you're going to need some satellite tracking software, and the people to know about is AMSAT. AMSAT.org, and you'll find them at the big Hamfests as well. They have software, they have all the tools necessary to get involved with satellites. And their software may have real-time maps showing the position of satellites over the Earth. It'll have the time, the azimuth, the elevation of the satellite, and also the apparent frequency if there's any Doppler shift. And we'll also have the Keplerian elements, the orbital information about the satellite as to where it is in time and space. And it's used then, Keplerian data is used as inputs to the tracking program, the computer software. Finally, the International Space Station is still up there, still has ham radio operators aboard, and may be contacted by technician class license holders on VHF and UHF. So that's something that you could look forward to. All right, last questions. So which amateurs may contact the International Space Station on VHF bands?
Well,
Yes, any amateur holding a technician class or higher license. And they have it this way because there still are folks who have novice licenses that they have renewed and renewed and renewed, so they cannot do this. So what is the FCC Part 97 definition of a space station?
Charlie,
Yes, 50 kilometers. Yeah, an amateur station located more than 50 kilometers above Earth's surface. And who may be the control operator of a station communicating through an amateur satellite or space station?
Delta,
Yes, any amateur allowed to transmit on the satellite's uplink frequency. And what telemetry information is typically transmitted by satellite beacons?
Delta,
It's Charlie, the health and status of the satellite. They don't have accurate clocks up there, so that's, and they have, maybe clock data, but maybe the temperature of the satellite, the voltage of the batteries, stuff like that. And what is the impact of using excessive effective radiated power on a satellite uplink?
Bravo,
Yeah, you block access by others and they'll know, and you'll be the power hog. You sent your call sign, they'll know who you are. So which of the following are provided by satellite tracking programs? Read carefully.
Delta,
Yes, maps showing real-time position, time azimuth elevation of the pass, and the apparent frequency, all of those. And what mode of transmission is commonly used by amateur radio satellites?
Delta,
Yeah, all of those, single sideband, FM, CW, and data. And what is a satellite beacon?
Delta,
It is a transmission from a satellite that contains status information about the satellite. And which of the following are inputs to a satellite tracking program?
Bravo,
Named after a German physicist, Johannes Kepler, the Keplerian elements. And what is Doppler shift in reference to satellite communications? Yes, we heard it. It's an observed change in signal frequency caused by relative motion between the satellite and the Earth station. And what is meant by the statement that a satellite is operating in UV mode?
Bravo,
It is indeed Bravo. U means UHF, so 70 centimeters is a UHF, and the downlink is in the 2 meter band, VHF, so yes, that would be UV. And what causes spin fading?
Bravo.
Yep, rotation of the satellite and its antennas. And what is a LEO?
Delta,
It's a satellite in a low Earth orbit. All of the Starlink satellites up there for internet access, those are LEOs as well. So who may receive telemetry from a space station? This is a trick question. Think about it again. Who may receive telemetry from a space station?
Alpha,
Yeah, anyone can listen. So which of the following is a way to determine whether your satellite uplink power is neither too low or too high? Yes, your signal strength on the downlink should be about the same as the beacon. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of Chapter 6. I am so proud of you. You did a great job. Hokey smokes, that's a lot of stuff. Let me go ahead and remove the spotlight. Are there any questions or comments before we go tonight?
I have one.
Yes, please.
Okay, what is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, ARES? And it says a group of licensed amateurs who have voluntarily registered their qualifications and equipment for communications duty and public service. So does this mean that you have to tell them all your radio gear and you better have it at all times? Or can they just come and take your gear? It has to be registered.
No, what they want to know is about your capabilities. Are you VHF, UHF capable? Okay, then we'll put you in that group. Or have you got high frequency radios so you could carry messages or something in the high frequency bands? No, they're not going to come and take your radios. No, they're not going to, but that's the idea, is they're trying to know your capabilities as an operator and with your equipment.
Do we have to necessarily buy a hotspot box to be able to talk, or can we use our Wi-Fi box?
Okay, so if you're going to get one of the digital radios that we talked about, and you can use a hotspot with DMR or D-Star or Yaesu Fusion. If you want to do that, then yes, you're going to have a hotspot because it's receiving in the UHF frequency range and then translating that out to the internet. So yes, you would need that.
Okay.
Alrighty, we did good. Chapter 7 is next week. We're going to have some extra time. We're going to do some more demonstrations. Until then, let me say 73.
73.
See
Thank
ya.
you very much.
See you next week.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary and crew.